The shutdown of the United States government is now in its second week. On Wednesday, the U.S. Senate failed once again to pass a stopgap funding measure, leaving lawmakers at an impasse. CGTN's Jim Spellman has this report.
The motion upon reconsideration is not agreed to.
For the sixth time, the U.S. Senate has voted on measures to fund the U.S. government. And for the sixth time, those bills have failed as the government shutdown enters its second week. The issues remain the same. Democrats want to negotiate over health care subsidies, which cover millions of Americans, before they vote to reopen the government.
There is nothing Republican leaders are doing that even suggests they are serious about ending the shutdown or preventing health care price hikes.
And Republicans demand Democrats vote to end the shutdown before negotiations take place.
Every day that the Democrats keep the government shut down is creating more and worse consequences for the American people. What they've tried to do is hijack this to get $1.5 trillion in new spending.
While Congress is at an impasse, about 750,000 federal workers are furloughed, and President Trump suggests some won't receive back pay when the government reopens.
But it really depends on who you're talking about. But for the most part, we're going to take care of our people. There are some people that really don't deserve to be taken care of, and we'll take care of them in a different way.
Some government services have been cut, and the White House has paused billions in funding, mostly for projects in areas controlled by Democrats. President Trump is threatening permanent job cuts if the shutdown continues.
It's stressful because you just have all this uncertainty.
And thousands of flights have been delayed as some air traffic controllers who face only partial paychecks next week are staying home.
Yeah, there's controllers that have called out sick. If we see there's issues in the tower that are affecting controllers' ability to effectively control the airspace, we'll reduce the rate, and you'll see more delays, or you might see a cancellation.
The White House says it will use money from tariffs to fund a federal food program for nearly 7 million poor children and mothers. But the longer the shutdown continues, the harder it will be to keep government programs running. Jim Spellman, CGTN, Washington.
To discuss this and more, let's bring in our guests. Joining us from Charlotte, North Carolina, Mary C. Curtis is a columnist at Roll Call and host of the Equal Time podcast. Here in Washington, D.C., Rina Shah is a political commentator and CEO at Rilax Strategies. Jean Rossi is an attorney at Carlton Fields in Washington, D.C., and former Assistant United States Attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia. And Brandon Brice is a conservative columnist and the secretary of the Delaware Republican Party. Thanks to all of you for being with us. Brandon, let me start with you. And we just heard in that report the angry blame game that's going on between the Republicans and the Democrats. This is over passage of this bill, which will allow the government to be funded through November 21st. Democrats say this is about health care costs. And we just heard the Republican leader there say it's about a clean funding resolution, which is non-partisan. What do you see as the key issue here? What's at stake?
First of all, Anand, the key issue is the American people are the ones that are being hurt by this, regardless of how this goes. But, you know, this is about not only have we become tribal in this nation as far as, you know, in the 80s and 90s, Republicans and Democrats, they talked it over. They may not have agreed, but they had the conversation. What you're seeing now is an example of two extremes. And furthermore, what you're seeing is you've got a Democratic Party that is trying to push this budget over, knowing that, you know, this excess spending, we cannot afford this spending, but yet they're saying they're willing to take this hijacking of a shutdown just to prove their point. And it's quite sad, but this is where we are in Washington. And I can tell you, you know, I've spoken to many people here in the D.C. area who are impacted by this. They've got about another week before people are starting to say enough is enough. Food, jobs, people are seriously being impacted, coming off of, let's not forget, COVID. That was 5 years ago, but there's still impacts of that. And so I would hope that both parties can finally come to an agreement sooner rather than later.
Mary, as Brandon pointed out there are lots of things at risk here, lots at stake. The prices of food being one of them, jobs being another, people's futures at stake as well. Well, the Democrats have presented a proposal which will fund the government until October 31st. That will also extend health care subsidies until the end of the year. Is there a way for them to compromise on this, a way to talk this through? Why is this such a non-negotiable?
Well, you see that Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, they haven't even brought the Republicans back to Washington, back to the table. And I think there's a lack of trust that is the reason why there's not a lot of compromise. And it starts at the top, I would say. In the report before the panel came on, you heard the President of the United States talk about that some people deserve to be made whole, some people don't deserve it. Usually most presidents say they're the president of all the people, even the ones who didn't vote for them. And he's very clearly, as the previous guest said, wants to take care of his tribe. And Democrats and Republicans will be hurt in all of these states without these subsidies. I've heard over 22 million people will be hit with these price hikes for their health care. And that's always been a big consideration for Democrats. And you even saw Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene talk about her adult children will be hit with this. And so, on both sides, people can see that this health care is really crucial, and there'll be some people who will lose their health care. But as the previous panelist said, a lot of people are being hurt. And so it has to be a compromise. But you've also seen the president and some folks in his administration look on this as an opportunity to trim the size of government, to threaten to not give back pay to furloughed workers, which actually he guaranteed in his first administration. And so they're seeing this as actually something that is a little bit positive. So I'd say, first of all, you have to have everyone on the same page talking about what the American people want, which is to end this shutdown. Right now, we've seen air travel be affected as a lot of controllers aren't coming into work. They're trying to work other jobs. They're under stress, which you really don't want for traffic controllers. So as more and more time goes by, you'll see the American people demand that our leaders in Washington do come together, because they're not the ones suffering.
Right. Rina, good to see you, Rina. We've heard this is about extra expenditure, more money being spent, $1.5 trillion more that Republicans say Democrats want to spend. Democrats say this is about healthcare costs, it's about other things to go. But what are the implications of this? Is a political battle. What are the implications for the country, especially those federal workers, many of whom are facing mass firings? As Mary pointed out a moment ago, air traffic is coming under pressure as well. I mean, something's got to give, isn't it?
Well, President Trump is dangling these mass firings like a bad reality show twist. I can't put it any other way. Thousands of federal workers could lose their jobs permanently if this drags on. And he's calling it an unprecedented opportunity to slash, quote unquote, Democrat agencies. But that's really code for gutting essential services. And we've seen this playbook before in 2018. It tanked the economy then by $3 billion. So what I say is this is not draining the swamp. It's flooding it with unemployment lines. And regarding the impact of the shutdown on federal workers and on social services, look, hundreds of thousands of federal workers are furloughed or working without pay right now. Over 200,000 military personnel alone might miss their October 15th paycheck. And regarding social services, WIC for 7 million moms and kids is totally teetering right now. National parks are closed mid-tourist season, and even Smithsonian museums are scrapping by on leftover funds. So this shutdown is not abstract. It is empty fridges, delayed veterans benefits, and families who are choosing between rent and groceries. This is not the America we need in 2025. This is not the America that Trump promised on the campaign trail. And blaming Democrats, I think that's just deflecting from a manufactured mess. Let's not forget, this is the 11th shutdown event we've had since 1980. Highly frustrating and needs to end tonight or tomorrow, but will not.
Gene Rossi, as we heard from the other panelists, this is a crisis. The divisions are so deep right now, there doesn't seem to be any way in which some kind of compromise could be thrashed out. As Mary pointed out, there's a lack of trust. How do you see it?
Oh, I look at it very political. In March of this year, Mr. Schumer, the majority leader, caved and he didn't put up a fight. So what happened in New York is AOC and others are thinking of primarying him. So he knows that if he doesn't put up a good fight on this CR, he may not be nominated by the Democratic Party. So that's the politics on the Democratic side. Mm-hmm. On the Republican side, you got the author of the 2025 project who's salivating to implement that plan with Trump's encouragement. So they got a motive to just run this out and inflict more pain. So you have a perfect storm of bad motives that's creating this shutdown and lack of trust. I will say this. I used to work for a governor of Connecticut in the 1980s. And I got to say, I miss Ronald Reagan. My boss, Governor O'Neill, was a Democrat, but we worked with the White House. We worked at a House, worked with the Senate, and we tried to get things done. I want to end with this, though. History will tell you that the party in power, and the Republicans have the House, the Senate, and the White House. At the end of the day, history shows that when there's a shutdown, the party perceived to be in power, regardless of the merits of this clean CR, they are going to take a hit in the polls. And when that happens, it's going to probably take a week to 10 days. I think the Republicans are going to cave and start negotiating.
Okay. Rina, very quickly, do you agree with that? Do you think the Republicans will compromise on this and end this shutdown?
I think they'll have no choice but to do so. I completely agree because they are the incumbents. And the longer this lingers, this fight, the less public opinion will be on their side. They will be seen as the ones not coming up with the solution. So look, the 1 to 3 week mark is what I was estimating at first. I'm still somewhat hopeful that something can be done here. But this entire thing hinges on the ACA. I mean, this shutdown is entirely about healthcare and a fiscal spending bill. And about keeping premiums affordable at about something like $888 a year. There are Republicans, people sitting in ruby red states whose lives have been so impacted by Obamacare. So I think Republicans will be seen as holding the government hostage over $350 billion in extensions. But they've got to be real here. Without those, costs could double. So I think they don't want to leave millions uninsured, and they will come to the table, hopefully, as honest brokers within the coming week.
Okay, Brendan, Brice, let's turn now to President Trump's continuing crackdown on undocumented migrants, as well as what he tells us is escalating crime in major cities across America. He's now calling for the arrest of the Illinois governor, J.B. Pritzker, and the Chicago mayor, Brandon Johnson, for failure to protect ICE officers. I mean, do you believe that the deployment of National Guard troops and the ICE crackdown is justified in Chicago? And what do you make of the president's call for the Governor Pritzker as well as Mayor Johnson to be arrested?
Well, first of all, J.B. Pritzker probably has never even been to the south side of Chicago. And so I find it interesting that all of a sudden, he made a statement. He said, "Don't mess with my people." But I've talked to folks in Chicago who have said they've never seen this guy. But I will say this, if you're going to have a narrative where you're talking about cracking down crime, the data has to match what you're trying to do. I'll give you an example. Gary, Indiana, Baltimore, Maryland, Flint, Michigan. These are places that have been crime-ridden for years, for decades. Why are there no soldiers there? And so I think the president has got to be a little strategic that if you're going to send troops, and I'm all with it, because there are communities that have said, we need something done here because our Democratic local officials, our Democratic mayors, and our Democratic governors, they're not doing the job. But it's got to make sense. We'll use D.C. It's interesting. You see that apparently crime has come down, whether that's true or not. But the numbers have to make sense if the president is going to take a political chance and implement soldiers, because other than that, then it becomes something else. And so I think the president, if we're going to talk about reducing crime, let's go to the places where crime is actually high that most people know, that most people are already aware of.
Mary, you know, President Trump has also been using some very incendiary language when he talks about these crackdowns, referring to migrants, for instance, undocumented migrants as criminals, rapists, poisoning the blood of the country. And then we look at the crime crackdown, and most of the cities that are targeted are Democrat cities. This is what the mayor of Chicago had to say in response to this crackdown. Let's listen.
This president has intentionally worked to escalate violence in the city of Chicago and cities across America. We're just simply defending our fundamental right to our democracy. This president has made it very clear he doesn't support this Constitution. And if Congress, which our framers designed for Congress and the Supreme Court and the courts to provide checks and balance, if Congress will not hold this president accountable, I will.
So, Mary, where do you see this heading? And to Brendan's point, I mean, do the numbers justify these kinds of crackdowns?
No, we can see the numbers do not. Crime has generally been going down. And I have to give a shout out and a defense of my hometown of Baltimore, which was mentioned as crime ridden. Under its present young African-American mayor, Brandon Scott, it's the lowest that it's been in decades. And he's done this not by cracking heads and charging young people as adults, but by looking at getting young people, the folks who are more likely to be victims or perpetrators of crime, and doing interventions early. And those are the things that work, not this heavy presence. And in my latest column in Roll Call, I write about covering the Tea Party and how so many people under President Obama were worried that of government overreach, the don't tread on me flags. They said we are going to have under Obama people rappelling from helicopters and breaking in the middle of the night. And then we see this scene in Chicago, where this apartment building was pretty much attacked, and folks who were citizens, non-citizens alike, were dragged out in the middle of the night, including children zip-tied, and asked to prove they were citizens, left sitting there. And this didn't do any, it just seemed like overreach. And I want to ask, where are those people who were worried about constitutional protection? Does it only count for some people? Does it count for people in neighborhoods like the South Side, like South Shore, that this fantasy, this nightmare of government overreach came true? And you could see that they're not going after criminals and rapists. It would be too difficult to, it seems, try to investigate who are the criminals. They're going after folks who are coming into courthouses for their hearings, who are at their jobs. And it is disrupting communities. And you can see they have masks on. The videos out of Chicago have been horrific against protesters, against ministers, against journalists. So this definitely is, I think, a time to look at pushing the Constitution and seeing how they are trampling over some rights of certain people. And the governor and the mayor of Chicago are rightly wanting some answers, since they have not asked for this help.
Yeah. Rina, there was a poll that was done. New York Times Siena College poll says 51% of registered voters think Trump has gone too far on immigration enforcement. It's pretty much down the middle of the country. I mean, do you agree, and with that he's gone too far? And from a political point of view, could this come back to hurt Republicans?
I think it's really important right now to look at the justifications around these National Guard deployments that President Trump is making. He's selling these deployments as a fix for crime, homelessness, and invasion, but it's theater. It's not triage. And in Los Angeles, 4,700 troops peaked amid protests. And yet crime was already dropping. So now he's eyeing Chicago and Portland, and he's overriding those governors like Newsom and Pritzker. He's claiming total safety miracles. I think the justification here is a vague, quote unquote, war from within that sounds more like a bad movie than policy to me. So troops, if you look at this, troops are not trained for policing. They're for emergencies and not for patrolling tourist spots or quelling dissent. And I think the most worrisome thing from where I sit is on the legal challenges against Trump. The courts have really slapped back very hard. Illinois and Chicago sued to block the Texas Guard troops who rolling in, and they called it an authoritarian power grab. I think that was adequately worded under Title 10. And then Oregon is fighting a federal judge's block on an out-of-state on those out-of-state forces as well. So also California, those appeals are stacking up over there. So Trump is testing Insurrection Act limits here, and I never thought we'd be here at this point in his presidency. But look, we have to see this for what this is. These aren't hypotheticals. They are live lawsuits that expose overreach, and that erodes state sovereignty, and it risks martial law vibes in blue cities. That is going to come back to hurt the Republicans.
Right. Jean Rossi, these legal challenges that Rina mentions, I mean, there are these 3 states that are suing the administration. That's California, Illinois, Oregon, and Washington, D.C., by the way. But there's something else. President Trump is federalizing the National Guard. Can he do this? Does the law allow for it?
Yes, he can, but under certain circumstances. And Rita mentioned the Oregon. There's a former Trump-appointed U.S. attorney who's now a federal judge Trump appointed in Oregon. And she has issued 2 scathing opinions, at least 1, maybe 2, saying that Trump exceeded his authority under the various statutes to send in the National Guard or the military. What you need for the president to exercise that authority, you need an insurrection. You need a rebellion. And a bunch of people holding signs saying ICE is terrible, I should go home. That's not an insurrection, and it's not a rebellion. It's a bunch of people exercising their First Amendment rights. And I want to focus on this. What Donald Trump has done throughout this whole country is he's added gasoline to the fire by saying that these riots, these murders, these demonstrations are all funded and organized by Antifa, which is funded by George Soros. So he's throwing out this chum, this false narrative that feeds his MAGA base, because at this point in his presidency, and it's only 9 months, he needs his base. He's losing Marjorie Taylor Greene, if you can believe it. So I see a lot of rhetoric, but the legal basis for what he's doing is very weak.
Just one other point, Jean. You mentioned insurrection. The president wants to invoke the Insurrection Act, and reading some of the political media here in Washington, there seem to be serious discussions over it. I mean, what would that mean? Aren't there specific conditions that have to be met for that to happen?
Well, go back to Lincoln and the Civil War. The president has broad authority to use the military, the National Guard, or any part of the military to quell, destroy an insurrection, a rebellion, because we don't want people overthrowing our government. Bear in mind, on January 6th, that's what they tried to do. Minor point. But that's what he's going to try to invoke. But the judges in Oregon, the judge in Oregon and other judges are seeing through that false narrative, and they're not buying the story that there is an insurrection, there is a rebellion that would allow him to do that.
Yeah.
And I got to say this about the D.C. National Guard. I work in D.C. I live right outside of D.C. I can't tell you how many times I drive by the monuments and various parts of D.C. I always see 5 or 6 National Guard people, and they're doing absolutely nothing. They are yucking it up, and if they're not painting, emptying garbage, or raking leaves, or spreading mulch, they're just hanging out. So this whole National Guard thing is nothing but a show.
Okay, Brandon, we are rapidly running out of time, but I want to get to one other development that's been making news, and that is the former FBI Director James Comey was arraigned in federal court. He's accused of lying to Congress. He has pleaded not guilty. Democrats say that this is a political witch hunt. What do you make of it?
I mean, I think Comey has made his grave. I agree that, I think that issue has died. And I think the fact that we're still even talking about that I don't see any merit, and I agree actually on this issue. I actually agree with the Democrats on this.
Okay, Mary, Trump critics say he's weaponized the Justice Department for his own ends, and the president and his supporters say actually it was Joe Biden that weaponized the Department of Justice when they went after the president. How do you see these latest developments?
Well, you can see in this latest, the Comey case, they had to force to resign or fire actually attorneys. And we have the attorney here on the panel who didn't bring this case because they thought there was no merit to it. And he probably undermined the case by, writing on Truth Social that he wanted the attorney general to get this person.
Yeah.
And we see that the attorney general is acting like Trump's attorney rather than the Attorney General of the United States of America.
Okay, I want to get to Rina very quickly. Rina, I've got a minute. Now, in addition to James Comey, there are investigations into the California Senator Adam Schiff, one of the president's chief foes, Fani Willis, the Georgia prosecutor, Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, John Bolton, the former National Security Advisor as well, and the Open Society Foundation founded by George Soros. Does it look like a witch hunt to you?
Without a doubt, Trump is exacting revenge on his enemies. I think this is completely unnecessary. He and all those around him on election night of last year, rolling into inauguration, said that they had a mandate from the American people to make this a better country, one that he felt that Joe Biden made worse. And so why not focus on the solutions for everyday Americans?
Right.
Pocketbook politics is always going to matter. This isn't that, and these are vendettas being carried out. It's a sad state of affairs for a nation like ours. I think it's misguided, and I wish the president would stop.
Okay, we have to leave it there. We've run out of time, but thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Arnold Naidu in Washington.